Okay, well, as they say in Brazil, bienvenidos, everybody, and welcome to this new format. Because with Klear, this is the very first live webinar that we're doing, and yeah, I'm probably not going to go into presentation mode just because this is so much more comfortable. But what you're about to get, and welcome to everybody who's here. What you're about to get in a nutshell, and we're going to try to condense everything into about 1 hour, is our process, our system for taking B2B companies with almost no marketing to marketing operations that get big deals on a regular basis on a predictable scheme. Okay, so this is our, how we like to call it, the account-based marketing launch pad. And you don't have to worry about too much. You don't have to worry too much about the term account-based marketing itself. It's not that important, but we're going to go into it anyway. And so what you can expect from this roundtable, number one, the reason it's called a roundtable is because we want there to be discussion. So anytime you've got a comment or a question or anything else, feel free to drop it in, either in the chat, and Zoe's going to be checking on the chat, or just unmute yourself and come online and feel free to ask your questions, share your experience and whatnot. Okay, real quickly, who are we and why are we talking about what we're talking about? My co-host here is Zoli Erkel in the glasses and the hat, if you've got your camera on and if you see all the participants. He's the guy who has Zoli on his screen name, and he's got a hat because he's sitting outside and it's still kind of chilly in springtime Budapest. Yeah, he's forever been a startup guy and someone in B2B growth. He's a growth marketer, a certified growth marketer, whatever that means. But he's got a ton of education and experience, and he's been with us with Klear for almost a year. Probably
almost a year.
Yeah, and Zoli's like leading up 2 client projects, plus doing a ton of marketing for Klear, the company itself, for our agency consultancy. And yours truly, I'm Dan Rennie, and I'm very old. My hair's turning gray, and much of those years have been spent with marketing for technology companies, startups, big companies, small companies. I've also had my own adventure travel company, and we organized expeditions, which proved to be a very valuable phase in my life for B2B marketing, even though it feels totally different. But one super relevant experience, if you want to know, is marketing is my ability to market things that are not sexy and real hard to sell. Because if you think about it, a mountain expedition, of which we sold a ton of, is something that is life-threatening. It's guaranteed to be uncomfortable. You might even die. There is almost no guarantee for success, and it costs a shit ton of money. And so I knew that if I can sell this to enough people, I can certainly sell technology that is on the surface boring, and other things that are hard to sell, but perhaps not life-threatening. Okay, so that's the mercifully brief introduction from us. And we got a couple other people. Zoli, what's up? Now we got 2 Zolis, you see. Okay. And so throughout this discussion, throughout this roundtable, we're going to be referring to one of our clients quite a few times, because this was titled the ABM Launchpad Roundtable for B2B tech and software companies. So TrustDoc is actually a company that is who is selling cybersecurity services. Okay, it's EKYC, if any of you know this, and they're a perfect example for everything that we talk about today. They're based out of Tokyo. Here's Jeff, who is the head of global operations, practically the CEO, and they're at 48 people. They got some money to the tune of $12 million, and they don't really have a big marketing team, meaning they've got, okay, now it's like 1.5 people, or no, okay. So Zoe, yeah, it's still 0.5 people on the marketing team, and about 1.5 business development reps, and us. And with such a tiny team and not a huge budget, we're doing some exciting things, which we're going to get into. Okay, now what is account-based marketing? And Adorian, I know you said that you're familiar with this term, but you're not sure about, what we do and how we do it. So let me talk about that a little bit, okay?
I'm more than open to listen to you.
Okay, all right. Okay, so before we do that, I want to talk about like sort of the evolution of B2B marketing at technology companies, because I think it's super important to understand this when you get to actually applying some of the tactics and strategies that we talk about today, okay? So for the majority of any B2B company in the world, they are probably in stages 1 or 2 in terms of marketing maturity and growth development maturity, okay? So what that means is that most of these companies have a strong sales department. They've got formalized or semi-formalized sales processes, and they either have non-existent marketing, so they have zero marketing, or they have very little marketing, which is usually taking orders from the sales team to create brochures, have a website developed by some external agency or whatever. But definitely like growth is driven by sales, and marketing plays a secondary or a tertiary role, usually just supporting. Okay, now stage 3 is where things start getting interesting, because here you have a marketing department that's a bit more mature. And what happens here is that you have campaigns, you have lead generation, you have marketing getting leads for the sales department. And then with that, you also have debates and fights between marketing and sales, because leads are usually not of good enough quality for sales. But nevertheless, marketing is stepping up. They are playing a much more important role in the growth equation. And that's stage 3. Okay. Now, what happens in stage 4 is that companies realize, and again, we're talking about B2B companies and enterprises, they realize that what they actually need is a much more aligned approach with the sales department, and a much higher focus or a heavier focus on accounts themselves and processes around the accounts, instead of focusing on the individual leads themselves. Okay. And now this is a whole other chapter, like what ABM means and like how to implement it. And obviously we're going to get into that, but just know that when you enter ABM into the picture, which is a more concise way for B2B companies to do growth, like that's what we call stage 4. And then stage 5 is sort of like the growth/revenue department. Most people use that synonymously. Some people view it as separate things, like a revenue department is different from a growth department. Let's not get into that because it's not that important at this point. But there, what happens is that you have like one department which has one leader, and then marketing and sales are sort of sub-departments in that. And the reason that works really well is because both sub-departments answer to the same leader. They are aligned over KPIs, and there's much more collaboration and interwovenness between the two departments. Because what happens in stage 3 and also in stage 2 over here is that you get people like, like debating and fighting, because again, marketing is like usually handing off leads. Sales is usually unsatisfied with the number and the quality, but at least one of them. And it just leads to very fruitless debates. So do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, I guess I would just quickly say that what I often see is that sales is viewed as something completely different from marketing, whereas I would say that sales is somewhat like a direct form of marketing. It's like the most direct form of marketing. And so a lot of companies feel like, hey, we are doing sales, it's all going fine, we're getting all the deals that we want to get. But after a while, if you want to expand, you're not going to be able to do that very direct form of marketing forever. Yeah. So, the logical way of expanding that is just working together with marketing and actually bringing that up to like a bigger scale, sort of, opening that up.
That's a super point. That's an awesome point. And a lot of times what happens is when we get into these processes and we talk about companies on how we do these things and we explain them the process, like sometimes they're like, hey, but isn't this sales job? And we're like, yeah, traditionally sort of, but things are so interwoven in B2B right now that it's sometimes hard to make that distinction, that clear line. And you might hear debates on, okay, well, SDR, sales development reps, should they answer to sales or marketing? And these questions are all secondary or tertiary in importance, especially when viewed in the light of, how a department should function. What's up, Adorian? Tell me. You got your hand up.
Yes. Thank you. Just want to ask, what size of companies we are talking about now? Because when we talk about B2B, for me, it might be small, medium enterprises also, but based on the fact that you just told, we talk about departments and business units and whatever, so it's at least 100 or even enterprise size companies.
Yeah, this is size agnostic. So the methods that we talk about work for tiny companies like this. So that's 48 employees. It can work with even less employees. The point is that they have like nobody in marketing and 1.5 people in business development, and the rest are developers and product people. Our company is 3.5 people, okay, and it works for us. So this is size agnostic, and the largest client we have has over 150 people, and so there's no limit in size to the validity of everything that we're talking about. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I would say it might have been somewhat misleading when I said that if you want to expand on that, if you want to scale that up, definitely marketing. But as George said, in our case, we could have a bunch of sales development reps and we could just go out with them and they could try and do the prospecting for us. But it just makes much more sense to do it via marketing and then not have to have all of that people as like sort of a sales department.
Okay, got
it. Yeah. Others, Lily, do you have anything to ask or add to that? Because I know you work in, do you work in a nonprofit space, I think?
No, actually, it's a for-profit early startup. So here at now, just to be clear, it's a really small team. So actually on the business side, there's like 6 employees, and that includes me. So I'm kind of like in the situation where we're really in the early process of the whole kind of account-based kind of things. But on the other hand, I'm the one who does the marketing and also kind of like the pre-sales kind of activities. So what I'm trying to do is like generating pipeline and delivering SQLs. And then actually that means that I'm trying to like generate demos after discovery calls. So that's where I hand off to our product manager. So that's why I'm interested and to join this discussion, because I'm just getting into it, and starting to learn about it. But yeah, it's a for-profit, absolutely. Just it's kind of like a tech for good kind of thing. So
that's super. I think you guys are at stage 3, right?
yeah, kind of like that.
Place to be. I mean, it's a good place to be. And the good news, by the way, the good news is even if you're at stage 1, so this isn't a step-by-step thing.
Yeah.
No matter how small you are and how underdeveloped your marketing and growth is, you can start at stage 5, which is what we're doing. So we're a 1-year-old company, and in the beginning it was me. 2 months later it was Dana and me, and because we don't even have a sales department yet, and we're probably not going to have a sales department for a very long time because we're just so focused on marketing that it drives most of the demand. And for us, sales is going to be just like, not pushing people, but helping people make a decision. So it's never going to be the traditional sales role. So we're starting here at stage 5, where everything is under one roof that relates to growth. Yeah. Okay. This is awesome. Okay. So we started saying that, okay, like ABM, this tends to be this magical thing. And Adorian, like, I understand your question, because a lot of times when ABM comes up, it's in an enterprise context. And 2 seconds after mentioning the term ABM, people start talking about platforms and technology, which usually cost in the $20, $40, $30, $50,000 per year range. And so small companies are like, oh, I can't do ABM because I can't afford it. Well, guess what? You can, because what we're going to talk about, especially in the early stages of going to market and putting together a comprehensive growth plan, you don't need a whole lot of technology, and whatever you need doesn't cost a lot of money. It costs very little money. Okay. So we're all about strategy first and experimenting and doing the approach right. And then when you're scaling, you can enter technology into the picture. And that's when things start, getting more expensive. But by that time, you'll already have built up a system and verified everything. So by the time you turn on LinkedIn ads and account targeted ads, you already should have a proof of concept. How are we with time? 17 minutes into this thing. Okay, so it's important to talk about the ABM mindset, okay? First of all, customer experience above everything else. It's super important that the way buyers are buying B2B products today is changing, and it changed a whole lot even in the past 2 years. So with COVID, people started trusting salespeople even less and official vendors even less. So they started emphasizing and looking for other ways, alternative ways to get information whenever making purchasing decisions and researching for products. So that's when, like social networks, Slack communities, and all the non-traditional places have been like gaining importance. And what salespeople do and the traditional job of salespeople has been getting less and less important in the B2B buying process. And also buyers now have more power and a lot more freedom to do stuff. So what happens is that you want to concentrate on buyer experience, on customer experience. And customer experience actually starts with buying experience, buyer experience. So you want to make it as easy and as smooth as possible for them to service themselves. Because a lot of times, they don't need a salesperson until the very end, even at very complex purchases that take months and months in sales cycles. Purchasing very complex products now comes down to gathering enough information and pretty much making the decision without too much involvement from salespeople. Okay, so in this, he or she who can provide the better experience, the smoother experience, has a super big advantage. Okay, and the reason we mention always on research is because it's how you get to this stage. So you can't just brainstorm what the best customer process would be. You have to be like super connected to your market and to your customers, and constantly be looking for ways to learn from them, get qualitative information from them, and use that insight, use that information to make your process better, to make your process smoother. Okay. The other thing is we are like obsessed with quality over quantity. What's becoming apparent is that marketing teams who have volume quotas, be that in, I don't know, LinkedIn outreach or sales outreach or MQL quantity, they tend to suffer. And when you get rid of the volume quotas and you put quality quotas in there, meaning, of course, you still have to deliver leads, but you're measured on lead quality instead of lead quantity. And if you want to get specific, that's usually done with the MQL to SQL ratios, for example. So if that's your major metric and not just simply MQLs, then the results tend to be better because the marketer is forced to get quality and not quantity. So if it's a ratio that you have to improve rather than the mass quantity, then results are going to be much nicer. Because once you figure out how to get like good quality leads, and once you're clear on that, then it's much easier to scale than if you take the opposite approach, which is what almost everybody does, which is let's get a shit ton of people in here, let's get them all through the door, and then we'll try to pick out the ones that are good. And that just proves to be counterproductive, and more so. And it's getting more and more pricey and costly to get more people in the door. So Zoli, I don't know, not Erka Zoli, but the other Zoli who's here, like you're pretty deep into LinkedIn ads. Do you know how the, I don't know, cost per click or cost per conversion prices have been changing on LinkedIn over the past couple of years? I bet it hasn't been going down. I speculate that it's been going like up.
Yeah, actually. By the way, it had some trends, so for example, personally, it surprised me that even when COVID hit in the first few months, it wasn't that there wasn't like a huge spike on that. But yeah, actually, if we just watching the trends, as you mentioned, Joe, it's going up. So companies need to find something that they can differentiate on, even with the positioning or their outreach or their whole kind of like mindset that you mentioned. So this is something that's really resonating with me, that going after the quality and actually like optimizing on creating opportunities instead of like a ton load of leads. So yeah.
Yeah, because it's just going to be more and more unsustainable.
Yeah.
Of course, if you find a new social network where your buyers hang out and you can get leads at 5 cents, then yeah, build a huge list and and then worry about the rest later. But that's just not the reality these days.
Yeah, and on the other hand, a lot of companies, for example, for LinkedIn ads, they just try to, bid on top of each other. So that's how they want to win the market, and that pushes up the whole competition. So
Yeah, so it's quality over quantity. And also from our friends at Full Funnel, they have this slogan called, this relates here, they have the less leads, more revenue slogan at Full Funnel, which I really resonated with. They even put that on a t-shirt, so good job by them. So and what did I just do? I think I just deleted a slide, didn't I? Yeah, I did. Okay, brought it back. So what I accidentally just deleted is the Allbound Full Funnel approach, because a lot of times when you talk to marketing teams, they in B2B, they tend to focus on the very early stages of the funnel. So as you said, Zoli, like your job stops at getting leads and handing them off. And that's it. If that's not the case, sorry, like we didn't go into very great detail, but a lot of teams just stop at handing off the lead, and then the marketing team just totally disengages from that point on. Whereas what works is that if the marketing team is there all the way throughout the entire customer journey, not just at the beginning, but at the middle of the funnel and at the bottom of the funnel, because sales still needs you, like, right, even though it's a sales heavy part towards the end, they still need you, and you still need to get information, because the intelligence that you get from the bottom of the funnel interactions, from sales calls and from sales meetings and discovery calls, and what sort of materials they need and what prospects typically understand and what they don't understand. You want to take all that information and change your top of funnel strategy with that, your content strategy. So if you think that, customers have trouble understanding X 3 months after having started talking to us, then you want to start talking about X much earlier, so that the point goes across and the sales process goes through. Okay, let me speed up a little bit here. It's experimentation, which is the other important piece of the puzzle of the mindset that we advocate. And it's just that we start very small, and we're going to get into how we build up campaigns. So if you build up campaigns, we want to go like super niche, super focused, and then just see what happens from there. And you can always scale as big as you want, but you want to start very small and treat these as experiments. And experiments, a lot of times you screw up, they don't work, but that's okay. You can just start a new experiment. One of my masters, Frank Kern, said, there's a technical term for when a campaign works straight out of the gate. So when it works for the first time and the experiment's first attempt is a success. And the technical term for that is a fucking miracle. So I always keep that in mind. That's why I used to encourage myself whenever we screw up and whenever we do something first and it doesn't resonate and it doesn't work. Okay, if you're a definitions kind of guy or gal, then we have a definition for ABM for you. So ABM, or the type of marketing that we like to do, is an all-bound customer-centric, revenue-driven search for avenues of growth throughout the entire funnel or the entire buying cycle. Okay, but if you're like me and you're not a definitions person, you might be wondering, okay, but what the beep does that mean? Because it's a long sentence. And what that means is that you have a process like this, like what you see on the screens. So first you set the goals, obviously, as with any experiment or project or endeavor. Then what you do is you go into narrowing your ideal customer profile. And by the way, we're going to go deeper into each and every one of these steps here. And then you fine tune the messaging, because usually the messaging is not in line with your narrowed ideal customer profile, your new niche, your new chosen niche. So you usually need to tweak up the messaging. And then what you do is you start warming up the market. And instead of bombarding them with account targeted ads and offers and sending them cold calls or whatever, or all of the above, you do something else, but I'm going to get into that. Okay, and once the market is warmed up, then in step 4, you can do what we call the activation campaigns. That's where together with sales, you're actually doing sales specific outreach to the accounts which are mature enough. Okay, so you're constantly gauging and looking at the account in terms of maturity, and you only reach out to them with a sales offer or an offer to go deeper into a discovery call once you feel that they are ready. Okay, and then what we mentioned several times is that you optimize and scale and bring on more technology and more ads and more goodness. Okay, so that's the process. It's pretty straightforward. I'm not saying it's easy because it takes time and there are a lot of steps to it, even more steps than what you see here. but it's still good. It's a reliable, it's a dependable thing. It's been proven. So how about we go into how to do it? Does that sound good? Are you ready? Is you ready? You got questions? Okay. All right, setting goals. I don't want to go super deep into this now, but this comes down to sitting down like with the leadership and getting clear on both expectations as well as metrics. What tends to happen, and we see this with clients, is that they come in and they're like, okay, so what's the ROI on what you guys do? And that's a tough question, not because there's no ROI and we suck at what we do and it's actually a waste of money. It's because for some of the things we do, it's measurable. And for most of the things we do, it's not measurable. Let me give you an example of the latter. So, part of our strategy and what we like to do for everyone is to build a presence for them on LinkedIn. And it's easy to see how that serves future prospects and potential clients, but it also adds a ton to your existing pipeline and even to your existing accounts whom you want to upsell later. Because what usually happens is that people start doing LinkedIn. So, we take their profile and we ghostwrite for them, or we guide them and they do it themselves. And the first thing that happens is the employees and the existing partners and the business partners go back to these people and say, hey, I see you're active on LinkedIn. You're putting some pretty good shit out there. So like, what's going on? This is good stuff. Oh, that resonated with me. And so they start getting all this feedback, and naturally it impacts their existing business and their existing pipeline and their existing clients as well when they try to upsell them. So that's like the very first thing that happens when you start applying just a fraction of what we're talking about today. Okay, and there's no way to really measure that because you're impacting existing relationships. It's like when you bring a flower or you take your girlfriend out to the movies, like how much does that contribute to her saying yes when you propose for a marriage? You can't really tell. Sorry for that example, but I think it's accurate. Have you noticed that like dating is such a good analogy for everything that we do in marketing? There's a dating analogy for almost everything in marketing. So what we're talking about is when you're setting up a growth program, a marketing program, what metrics you should be looking at. And we're pretty big on leading metrics as well. So we don't just want to measure number of SQLs or even the ratio that I mentioned, the MQL to SQL conversion rate, let alone revenue, because these are lagging metrics, meaning when you're dissatisfied with a metric like this, it's already too late to do something about it. What we like is leading metrics, which is sort of the input metrics, which is what you do to achieve and to get and to meet your lagging metrics. So for example, activity measurements like how many LinkedIn posts you do per day, or how many blogs you put out, or the number of people that you connect to on LinkedIn in a given time period. So those are leading metrics, and it's good to agree with leadership on these metrics when you're building out the program. Okay, the second thing is ideal customer profile. And the name of the game here is narrow. You want it to be as narrow as possible. And again, keep in mind that the ideal customer profile is the best potential target clients whom you will target in the first round of your growth campaigns. Okay, Zoli, do you quickly want to explain the term ideal customer profile? Because maybe not everybody understands it, or maybe they mean something else.
Yeah, I think one thing to keep in mind when you're putting together an ideal customer profile is that you're not solely concentrating on like firmographics. So you're not just putting out, numbers and metrics with regards to like what size of firms you're looking for and all of that. But you actually want to put down like more, I would say, personal level things. So like, what sort of companies are you looking for? What is it that you're looking for in a client that you would like to work with? And, that really just sets up the option to work with people that you actually want to be working with, because if you put in time and effort into people that will actually likely not convert to being your client, that is just a waste of your resources. And so one of the points that we do when we are putting together an ideal customer profile, and I'm not sure if we are going to have time to go into this, is
yes,
that we are
right here.
We're not just okay, cool. So we are not just looking at like obviously we want to put down basic metrics, so like industry, sub-industry, size, region. So those are like, I would say, the starting point, the base ground. But then the other things that we want to look at when we go a bit further down is like, let's say, tech stack. So are there any maybe leading ideas that we get on with regards to like technology? Is there something that they do that signals to us that they might be a good fit? And then we actually go into like challenges and pain points. So like, what is the stage that they are likely in? What is something that will just signal to us that our solution would be a good fit for them? What are some of the strategy goals that are related to the service that we can provide to them? So why would they look for a service such as the one that we are providing? And then some other things that we actually want to be looking at if we go a bit further down is like, so what are some of the things that would disqualify them from being a good fit? And these won't just be like the exact opposites of qualifiers. So they are not like we're writing up all the qualifiers and then we are just flipping that coin over and we are saying, okay, if they're not this, then they're disqualifying them. This actually should be stuff that even after we have qualified them and even after we said, okay, they're a good fit, are there some things that would still mean for us that we should not work with them, or we should not put effort into trying to make them a client? Because they might be a good fit in the sense of like their size, the region that they are in, maybe even some of the challenges that they have, but they might just be in a region which has some typical or some specific regulatory requirements that would hinder them from working with us. And they might be a good fit otherwise, they might want to actually work with us, but they just can't do it for whatever reason. So why put into effort into trying to convert them?
Yeah, and disqualifiers, like, let's put political correctness aside and let's just be honest here. So for a lot of companies, it's a disqualifier if management or leadership is above a certain age. Meaning if they're above, like, let's say 50 to 55 years of age, and the company is selling something that is progressive and new, and they have found that it's very hard to convince people who have more rooted experience in the marketplace. And this isn't discriminating based on age. This is totally based on, and again, this is just an example, so it doesn't have to be this way. I'm not saying that never try to sell to people above the age of 55. That's totally not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that for this certain company, they realized that if they try to get their ideas across to someone who's been working in the industry for 25 years, then it usually doesn't happen, because they need to be breaking down such big walls that it just never happens. They forever remain skeptical, even if there's openness initially. So they have decided, based on this experience, that they're just going to skip companies where the CEO or the buyer, the primary buyer, is above a certain age. Okay, yeah. So we're talking about disqualifying criteria like this. And again, this doesn't sound politically correct, but it actually is, because it's just based on pure experimentation and experience.
I would say maybe an even more obvious example of this would be, let's say that you are building up like a fintech startup, and the DACH region is actually a good region for you. But in Berlin, a lot of people still actually use cash. So they are not really, accustomed to using cards for whatever reason. They are using cash. So you could say that the DACH region is a good region. People in Germany are whatever experienced in handling money and all of that. But still, you don't want to be trying to market for people in Berlin because they are just more accustomed to using cash. So it, makes no sense. And do we want to be looking at the buying committee as well?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
May I have a
just
question?
texted me.
Sorry?
Sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Just wanted to ask if you can scroll up to the problem awareness part. Yeah. So how do you validate the problem awareness or problem perception? In the beginning, it's a guessed target group. So how do you validate it?
So I would say it really, yeah, first of all, that's a really good question. And then what I would say is that it really depends on what stage you're at. So let's say that you already have a bunch of customers. Maybe, you're not as successful yet, but you already have clients that you're talking to. In that option, in that case, it's quite easy. You just start talking to your best customers, the ones that you really like to work with, the ones that are bringing in the most ROI and all of that. And you just figure out what are these features or what is it that they have in these senses. And then if you don't have that, you can actually just start talking to people that you want to be prospecting out to. So that people that you want to become your customers, and you can just, run like interviews with them, run a market research and just start talking to them. What you will find is that often, although people are really afraid of this, a lot of these companies and a lot of these businesses are really open to talk. Maybe not everyone from the company, but you will find people that will be open to talk and open to tell all of these like minor details about themselves.
Yeah. So if you have existing customers, then definitely go talk to your best customers who are the easiest to sell to and the ones where you know that you can do the best job. If you don't have customers, because not every startups don't have customers, then you do something that we will cover in the next step, which is sort of a market research. We use that for campaigns, and you just do a market research with the companies who you think would make good customers, and you ask them about their experiences, their problems, and whatnot. So if you remember the principle of always on research, like this is totally that. It's something that you never stop, not just the experimentation, but the always on research mode or thing.
Yeah.
Okay,
so you often hear
talking to people, spending time in communities, reading what others are asking, checking out what kind of company is this person working for with this particular problem. Is that relevant in my buying journey? Yeah.
I guess one thing to keep in mind with this is that you often hear businesses talking about you know your customers and all of that, but it's not just about the customers that you had at the customers that you haven't won over. So your prospect, you actually want to be knowing the ones that you are working with, you've already had experience with. So that's something that a lot of companies forget about, is that don't just want to stop with understanding your customers. Once they are already your customers, you want to keep talking to them and keep asking for like feedback and what are we doing right? What is something that we want to be changing and all of that, because you're just going to get more and more information on who is it that you want to be working with.
Exactly.
Okay, and then the last bit of this, if you can scroll down then, is the buying person or the buying committee. And when it comes to like B2B, yeah, right there. So when it comes to B2B, one thing to keep in mind is that you're not just selling to one person. So it's not like, in B2C, you actually have to somehow win over a decision-making committee, sort of. So the buying committee, and it's going to be different people with different roles. You're going to have your decision makers, you're going to have your influencers. The champion is usually the person who actually brings the idea into the company, so the person that actually wants to buy you or buy your service. And then you're going to often have blockers as well, so people who, for whatever reason, based on their position in the company, are not as keen on having you or having your service. And this is something, again, to keep in mind and something to work on, and something to know that you have to understand that although now I know like what are the firmographics and maybe what are some of the personal challenges, you want to understand, you basically want to pinpoint all of the members of the buying committee in the niche that you are looking or after, you're going after. So the market that you're trying to market to, the market segment, you want to identify these people. And as you see, we have a champion, we have an influencer, and then we say, okay, usually a CMO will be the champion for this sort of solution. And then usually the blocker will be compliance and legal or whatever.
Yeah, this is our cybersecurity clients. So for them, the compliance/legal person at the company was found to be the one who usually, as they say in our language, spits in the soup. So breaks the deal when it looks good. The decision maker is usually either the CEO or the chief financial officer, or in the case of smaller startups, it's the founders themselves. And the influencer is, again, as Zoli said, the person who doesn't have a lot of stake in things, but they listen to their opinion. So this can be like, in the case of cybersecurity, a CTO or a chief operations officer. And yeah, the champion is the person who brings the problem into the company usually. So they're the most impacted by it. So in the case of this cybersecurity company, it was either marketing or product and sometimes operations, but the product person and the marketing person was the most impacted by this. So they're the champions. They're going to fight the hardest for getting a solution because they're the most impacted.
And then one thing you see here, I would say just the last thing that we could point out is that, as you see, we really go deep into all of these personalities. So it's not just like writing up, okay, this will likely be the CMO, and then they would want this because it's a good solution. We actually go into details of like, okay, this will likely help for them. It will be a help with regards to like maintenance, the ease of implementation in the user experience and all of that. So we go into, and this you can do again just by talking to the client or talking to prospects and then understanding all of these different mindsets or whatever.
Yeah. Quick thing. We got 15 minutes left. How is this so far, you guys? Are you getting value out of this, or do you want to switch us? Do you want us to switch to Q&A or do something else? Make a coffee or a tea instead? No, is this good so far? I'm serious about the question. So is it too generic? Do you know everything, or do you want us to go deeper? Just give us some feedback, please. Turn your mic on and you can just talk away.
I think it's pretty good, guys. I mean, it's so glad because I'm just in the middle of this as well at the startup I'm working on. So I'm just finishing one of the ICPs and yeah, awesome. I can just join you in this whole kind of movement that it's really worth to work on it. And
awesome.
And you see all your activities will be much easier when you validate your message. So yeah, I think it's really great, and I'm happy to see that you guys say the same thing. I think just one quick question maybe about the buying committee. So what I'm a bit struggling with is, even if I can identify and talk with, for example, with the champion and gain info on the decision maker, it's more harder to gain quality insights on the blocker and maybe on the influencer. So do you guys have any techniques or maybe recommendations of questions that help you out?
Yeah, we do. One thing is how you conduct these customer interviews, these customer researches, okay? The mistake that people make is that they ask direct questions. And what happens when you ask direct questions is that you really frame the mind of the other person, and they will want to give you they will feel that it's an interview, it's research, and that they're supposed to say certain things, and they're going to leave out the juicy and qualitative details that you need. So instead, what you want to be doing is frame the whole thing as a more informal conversation and get them to tell stories. Okay, and that's the emphasis is on getting them to tell stories. So the way you want to be asking questions is instead of saying a direct question like, who was blocking the purchase when you bought a cybersecurity software? You want to say like, okay, tell me about the time, what was going on when you started looking for a solution and you had narrowed things down to 3, and then you went on to choose just one. What was going on? What sort of conversations did you guys have? Who was involved in those conversations? Okay, and what happened? So you get them to tell stories and you get them to open up, and then they will say, okay, well, John didn't really want to go along, and John was the compliance guy, let's say. And you can say, okay, well, what do you mean he didn't want to go along? So you just go deeper and ask open-ended questions and whys. You ask why 5 times. So what do you mean he didn't want to go along? Well, he said we should do this in-house. really? And then, and then you ask deeper, okay, so how did he support that stance? Like, why did he want you to do it in-house? And then you go deeper and deeper and deeper, and then you really get a feel. It's never going to be 100% clear, or sometimes it will, but usually not. But that's all right. You'll still get like this qualitative insight.
Yeah, and I would say this is two things. Is one is just when you want to find out information on like the influencer and the blocker, ask the person or ask the client or whatever to talk about the lost deals. So like, what happened in a lost deal, because when you're talking about like deals that you won over, they might not know all of the internal struggles and all of the arguments that happen, and then they might not hear about like the reason why it took a plus 1 week for us is because we had this blocker or whatever. But when you talk about like lost deals, and specifically lost deals that went through like a few cycles of whatever, they asked questions, you got back to them, all of that, then you will likely have a better understanding of like how was it blocked, why was it blocked, how was it influenced in the meantime. So lost deals is one thing, and the other thing is that this is a work in progress. So it's not like we write this down at the beginning and like whatever 6 months later, 12 months later, we are looking back and like okay, everything was like 100% on point. We were just so right from the beginning. This is something that we work on constantly. So after a few months, we will likely revisit this, and or even just in an ad hoc way. So let's say that we find out something in a conversation that we actually wasn't expecting, and then we just go back and change it. So yeah, this is definitely a work in progress.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So we almost always have to go back and redo things, because after 3 months we're smarter. After 6 months we have even more information. So it's a never-ending thing. So I'm not sure if you can see on my screen here, but I have, because we use these documents on a regular basis. So I have like the strategy documents of all clients as well as ourselves in a bookmark here, because I just resort to them on a daily basis. So it's that important. Okay. We got like 8 minutes. So let's get into the juice and meat of it. So warm-up campaign. So what happens when you know your ideal customer profile and you've narrowed it down to a very manageable segment where you really don't have a lot of companies? So we're talking about big deals, and this can be as little as 20 to 50 companies or 10 companies even that you really want to go after. Well, what happens then? You want to first warm them up, so to say, so that, because you don't want to do cold outreach. So one thing that we do is LinkedIn. Okay, so LinkedIn is really good because you get to engage with buyers, decision makers, challengers, even blockers. So you would use your sales navigator to identify the people and the key people in the buying committee in a company, and you would follow them, comment on their stuff, like what they're saying, and try to engage in a conversation. Okay, that doesn't necessarily have to happen, but just to at least get on their radar by upvoting their skills, for example. Now, this tends to be hard because most of the people are not going to be active on LinkedIn. So this is a challenge, but an alternative that you can do is search for them on other social networks. And your sole purpose is to really get on their radar. So once you send a connection request, it's not going to be like dead cold. Or once you reach out to them with what we're about to talk about, a content play, it's not going to be dead cold. Okay. And when that happens, when you've warmed them up on LinkedIn or other social networks, what you can do is reach out with, for example, one of these content co-creation ideas. Okay. So what this means is that you can write an article and ask for a quote or input from them. So let's say you're the cybersecurity company and you have an eKYC solution like TrustDoc, our client. You can say, well, we are doing an article on cybersecurity problems and challenges for the, crypto industry. And we need a quote from your company in this article. And this article is going to be published in, I don't know how many places, and you're going to get your name shown, and it's going to be good for you. And so what they do, because especially if you target sales or marketing people, you know, they have this ego play. So they're like, "Ooh, I can get my name out there." So they're probably going to agree. And what you do when you is that you do a short interview with them. And in this interview, you obviously ask a lot of questions that you would ask in a prospecting conversation. But you're never going to get the prospecting conversation if you just, you know, ring them up and say, "Hey, I noticed you're in the crypto industry, and I thought we could have a discovery call to talk about your challenges and how we might be able to help." Okay, so that's the common approach. That's what's working less and less and less. So you can cold call 1,000 people like that and maybe get 2 interviews, but it's not gonna be pretty. So you warm them up first, and then you ask them for engagement. You invite them to your podcast if you have a podcast. You invite them to speak at an event, at a webinar or whatever. So we could just like hold a webinar like this, and we could invite someone to one of our prospects to you know, give their opinion and speak. And while we get ready for that, you know, we ask them questions and we get to know them. And after the event, after the happening, you know, we can send a thank you note, and we can flip it into a sales conversation. Okay. The other thing, yeah, this is sort of a very similar thing, summits or webinars, and market research, which is what we actually did with TrustDoc, and it's going on right now. Zoe, do you want to say 2 words about that market research campaign, like how that's built up? Because you're the one managing it, dude.
Yeah,
So
yeah, definitely.
you've got the insight on that.
Something I just wanted to add to this is that, you know, with any of these, what really helps is if you have a strong content creation background, which means, you know, you can do all of these and they will likely, you know, reap benefits, even if you're just doing whatever LinkedIn warm up and all of that. But what really helps is if your LinkedIn looks like, you know, someone's LinkedIn who you actually want to be talking to. So like in this case, you know, Dan's LinkedIn is built up. So you guys were actually interested in coming to this webinar today. But, you know, if you don't have anything on your LinkedIn, if you don't have any sort of content, and this really just refers back to the leading and the lagging KPIs or metrics that we talked about before, until you're just focused solely on the lagging ones. So like how many people, you know, attended, how many people liked and all of that, you will likely have much worse outcomes or numbers or results compared to when you're focusing on, you know, creating the content and putting stuff out there. So yeah, that's just something that you ought to be, you know, remembering. Okay, and then coming back to the research bit that we are doing with TrustDoc. So actually, that's something that we started around, I think, the end of last year, and what it led out to. So it started out as you know, a research campaign. The idea was just to put out a research campaign, start a market research with regards to the state of eKYC. What are some of these companies that have to have eKYC or for whatever reason want to have eKYC, are looking for? What are their goals for the next year? What is it that they are struggling with? What sort of teams they have and all of that. And then what happened at this stage is that we are completely updating the pipeline of TrustDoc, and this all, you know, basically came out of this market research page, because they realized that a lot of the companies in the pipeline weren't actually qualified in the way that they wanted to qualify it. Mm-hmm. And you know, this is something that they wouldn't have known if we didn't do this market research campaign. And I'm not sure. I think we reached out to about like 30 something companies at max, and over 25 participated in the campaign. They were all really happy to give out information and, you know, like talk about their challenges and all of that. And now we have like a platoon of information that we can use in our messaging with TrustDoc. We actually were able to you know, better niche down the positioning of the company. We were actually better able to create better messaging, and we were actually able to, you know, work, as I said, on their pipeline and requalify some of the companies, and then move some of the companies down the pipeline. And all of this came out from this really simple market research campaign in a few months.
Exactly. So Adorian, is this the sort of stuff that you thought that ABM is about? Is that about accurate or?
Plus minus, yes. And I really like the approach. I absolutely aligned. there would be some things that I would ask more and to get into details and just to share my experience, but it's not the time for now, I know. But all in all, I really like the approach and I'm sure that it works. So it's not a question.
Yeah. What about all you other folks? Oh yeah, we don't really have a lot of time to get into activation campaigns, but that's more I'm not going to say it's the easy part, but people usually have that down. So what we do with activation is once we see that there is activity and positive signals from an account, which can come from a lot of places. So it can be from conversations, it can be from them interacting and engaging with your content. And there are ways to gauge that and measure that. But when the time is right, you can reach out with specific offers. And what really works like gangbusters is sending stuff in the mail. So if your outreach involves a personalized letter and actually sending a personalized small gift in the mail, then that really tends to, that gets awesome results. There are actually companies specialized on sending personalized gifts like that. And the reason is because it really works if you have the right strategy behind it. If you just send out gifts to cold prospects or warmish prospects that is unpersonalized and whatever, it's going to be scammy and it's not going to work. But if it's just a little thoughtful thing like a personalized water bottle, like with something personalized written on it or printed on it, then it really goes a long way. And if you have the right offer with the letter next to the gift, these tend to get 100% response rates. So.
To be fair, you said that activation is something that usually most of the companies have down. But to be fair, we could have a completely separate webinar on that. We might actually have that. So yeah, that can actually make up a whole hour.
Yeah, definitely. Guys, who's got questions or comments or experiences?
Yeah, hi Dan.
Hey, what's up, Ahmad?
Hi Dan. Fine.
I'm good, thank you. I'm good.
Yeah, I felt more of the ABM, the account-based marketing. It's more to the, attached to the LinkedIn. For example, in the Middle East, we have it in Dubai, in our Jordan area, and Egypt, and things like that. I think the LinkedIn, it's to my humble knowledge, it's not that much active as much as in Europe and in the States and things like that. So is it the ABM? Is it just for the? You think it's the only beneficial platform, or the ROI? It's going to be only for LinkedIn, or it can be with other platforms also. It can be. And this is, I think, where experimentation and testing things like that, is it going to be as such, with your layout of campaigns and whatever, and the marketing strategies that you have already?
Sorry, Dan, before you answer, can I just quickly say that we actually have a project that is running completely on, let's say, Slack. So that's a whole project. We have basically no outreach on LinkedIn with that, so that completely is running on Slack.
Exactly. So it always starts, Ahmad, with looking at where your customers are, quote unquote, hanging out professionally. In extreme examples, so if we wanted to do a project for the mining industry, let's say, they're definitely not on LinkedIn, but then we would look for associations, gatherings, in-person events or meetings where those people can be engaged. So and even in the most traditional industries, you have associations or you have websites and mediums which have newsletters. So they send out a weekly or a monthly newsletter. And if you are able to get into that newsletter, and you can usually buy your way into that newsletter, then you can message people, and then you can invite them to, for example, a research. Or if they have events, you can go and network at those events. So there are a lot of ways. And the interesting thing, Ahmad, is that what we're talking about in ABM, it's technology and platform agnostic, meaning that people have been using these strategies ever since the Middle Ages. So you don't even need the internet for it. Okay. And Yeah, so it's just the short answer is LinkedIn is easy for us because it's here and it's convenient, but at the end of the day, it's not very easy because it's hard to stand out on LinkedIn. But it provides a comfortable avenue. But there are a lot of other channels that you can utilize, not just LinkedIn. So in Russia, we would use VKontakte, or in Russian countries. You know, everybody, I think even professionally or business-wise, they are active on VKontakte. So or Telegram, for example. So you just have to find where the people are and then go there. If that makes sense.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Just for learning purposes, if I may ask you, Ahmed, I don't know what is your industry you're working on, but if you can tell me after, I would be interested, what is the best practice on your area, in your region, to reach out to people?
Sure. I mean, you know, the social platforms, I think it's, you know, different from one country to one country. Like in Saudi Arabia, they use the Twitter, for example, you know, it's very famous over there. In Jordan, it's the Facebook. In UAE, for example, they use the Snapchat, you know, it's very famous over there. So it's, you know, in the Middle East, you know, different country, it has its own, you know, I think most attended, you know, platforms or things like that. So from one country to one country, you know, but mostly Facebook is really great in the Middle East, you know, and but of course the LinkedIn is the most professional one, but I don't really find it that much active still, you know, as much as I see it in Europe and in the States, and that's why I was inquiring about this thing, you know.
Yeah, thank you for the answer. And I'm really surprised because here, at least based on my experience, we consider Facebook being a kind of professional channel to reach out. So one time I did it when I never reached people in Austria on LinkedIn, they didn't tend to use it. And we tried on Facebook, some politicians, and they used it better.
Yeah.
Experience. Thank you for the
and it works.
Plus minus.
Yeah. That's the thing, you know, like with TikTok as well. People think that TikTok is only for like the Generation Z and for teenagers, but then you see middle-aged men on TikTok. You see people, you know, leading CEOs, whatever, using TikTok. So you never know what will work.
Yeah, true. So we're experimenting with TikTok right now because we really think it's going to be the next platform where if you start, where it's easy to build an audience now, but it's going to be much harder later. And the decision makers are definitely on there in more and more. So obviously not to a great extent now, but it's definitely a trend that's not going to drop anytime soon. So we are building our presence there on TikTok. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, guys, I would love to continue this conversation another time. One of the things is that, yeah, as Zoli mentioned, we might do a separate session on activation campaigns if you're interested in that. But I also want to invite you to, we have this little Slack channel, this closed Slack channel. There we just hang out and we talk and it's a bit quiet now, but we used it to do some internal conversations as well. And there are already some other people from other companies there. And so if you're interested, we can totally send you an invite and, you know, we can just keep the conversation going over there.
Happy to accept. And personally, I'm interested in this activation campaign because I'm wondering, since you started to talk about it, how you can scale it. Because it would be also a good topic to understand, how, even if you can scale activations.
Okay. Yeah. Good question. The short answer, I'm just going to go ahead of ourselves and answer your question. Because there's this obsession in the marketplace with scalability. But if you think about it, what we are talking about is winning big deals. So winning big deals is about winning big deals, meaning you don't really need a lot of huge deals in order to be very, very happy and to meet all your goals. And when we're talking about activation campaigns, you're only reaching out to companies who have shown specific interest and that you have a really good opportunity of working with. So you don't need to do activation campaigns to hundreds of companies. So in the first place, like, you don't need to scale it, because again, like, you are selling at least $10,000 per year products. Bye, Zodi. See you later. Okay. So like, and if it works, you can just get people to do it, and you don't need to machine scale it. But there are other activation campaigns which are easier to scale.
I would be happy to hear about them, really.
Yeah. All right. Great. So you guys, thank you so much. Zodi sent the invitation to the Slack channel. We're going to drop it to you in LinkedIn messages if you want to join. And yeah, we'll see you the next time around.